Hey class, just wanted to put together another video for you for chapter 2. Um, there's a couple ways I want to approach this. This will be one of maybe 2 or 3 for this particular chapter, but understanding the external environment is essential for a business, and I have my own personal story here that I want to relate to you that speaks directly to this particular chapter. So I spent over 20 years in the corporate world. Towards the end of that, I had an opportunity to buy into a restaurant, and I did that right at the downturn of our economy in 2008. And it was really interesting that during that period of time, there were also restaurants in the area that were really in deep trouble. And it was pretty clear that they didn't do a lot of planning and preparing for a deep recession, and not a lot of companies do actually, so that's no surprise. So long story short, these 3 restaurants in particular in this little town here south of Kalamazoo went out of business in one way or another. Ironically, 2 caught fire and 1 closed. One was arson, and the other, well, they couldn't prove was arson, but we suspect it might have been. So what had happened was we got into that real deep trough recession, and all 3 restaurants owed money. Were not able to make their cash flows and just couldn't sustain a business. Well, I purchased a restaurant that was actually owned by my in-laws. It needed a lot of updating and remodeling. So I took some money that I had and some CDs and actually a 401k that was tanking at the time. I cashed out of and put it right into the restaurant. Restaurant has been up and running now for better than 6-7 years, doing pretty good. Well, recently, in this same small town now, a gentleman bought some property and put a Wings Etc. in. Simultaneous to he putting that Wings Etc. in, the city okayed a B-dubs to come in. So you can feel the competitive pressure just from that information, can't you? Now the interesting part here is that, in my opinion, neither companies are looking at the macroeconomics here. We're going through a pretty good bubble of growth, but it's not going to stay that way for a long time. And if you study the macroeconomics in this area and you study the demographics in this area, you'll know that the median income here is significantly lower than many Midwestern cities, okay, along the what I'll call Rust Belt. The median education here is considerably low. There isn't a lot of educational opportunity in the immediate area, and there isn't a lot of employment opportunity in the immediate area. So there's not growth on the horizon that I would call good paying jobs that are coming here. So as you scan the external environment, these companies invested the Wings Etc. has over $3 million into it, and I'm not sure what the B-dubs has into it, but I'm sure it's over $1 million. When you're looking at those kinds of numbers to invest, you better have strong evidence to support a good return on your equity, and we're talking at least 10%, right? And fundamentally, I don't think that can happen here in a protracted manner. So it'll be interesting to see what takes place. Right now, what are we hearing in the news? We're hearing a lot of back and forth about the markets, Walmart just announced store closures, which I don't think are as spooky as they sound. I think they're just reorganizing territorial locations, etc. But the point is that it's still kind of a shaky market at times. The automotive industry is doing really well, but that's not helping us in this town in particular. Okay, it doesn't bring jobs here like you would hope and like you would think. So here's how it relates back to what we're talking about in this particular class or this particular chapter. We look at the demographics. Okay, so if you want to start a business in a particular area that you're selling to, B2C, business to consumer, you're looking at the demographics in terms of what is their disposable income, what are the age groups in general that are, pervasive here, what are their habits, what are the things that they're interested in, etc., etc. And that begins to tell a story as to what kind of business you can bring to this market that consumers would be interested in. Okay? You look at the socio-political. In this particular town here, it's kind of favorable because the city's willing to work with any businesses to attract them, to bring them in. Unfortunately, from another flip side of it, it's been all service industry businesses, so they're not higher paying jobs and they're not large volume jobs. Okay? You're also looking at the technological landscape. And again, in our area here, not very robust because it's simply not higher education here. You don't have what you'd have, say, in Kalamazoo, where you'd have a diverse amount of educated people. Here, I think the average education here is somewhere between actually 9th and 10th grade. The economic situation here locally is sparse. It's not growth. It's about flatlined for the last probably 10 years. Okay? So these are things that you look at when you're trying to bring a business in. That would be B2C. But also, what if you were to bring manufacturing here and you wanted to take advantage of its labor pool? Well, we already spoke. Not higher ed here. Not overly skilled, although they do have tool makers and shop type workers here. And that pretty much comes up when you do the research of this particular area from census data. But they're generally blue collar type labor people. So not a lot of opportunity here to bring in and attract talent for the other side of the wall. So these are things businesses look at. Now, if you're looking at competing as a business and you overall have to put together forecasts and business plans, what are the external environment factors we're looking at? And this is all through our slides. This is all through our textbook that we're reading right now. We're looking at our microeconomics and macroeconomics. Okay? And when I talk about macroeconomics, I'm looking at the growth throughout the United States in terms of economics, but not only the United States, but also in the world itself. Okay? Now, there's a couple examples in the first part of this book that I thought were good. And one of them talked about 401ks. Read that. Okay? It comes off the right way. We have the baby boomers, of which I was at the tail end of, so I'm that old. We also know that the baby boomer period has just a large volume of people in that, and that particular segment of people have a large amount of money to invest in the market. Well, what do we know about 401ks? So, and very simply, in the beginning, when I first got into my 401k, 89, 90, they were promising all kinds of things. Well, that's changed now. And as you read that particular segment, you'll learn that it's illegal to espouse numbers and percentages that you could earn. So I'm going to end this particular video, take a good look at the external environment and how important it is to you. I've given you a couple of examples about it. We're going to talk some more about it later this week. Hope you're having a good weekend.